Hey there, welcome. We are super glad that you're joining us as always. We really appreciate it. Hey, when you have an opportunity, we would love for you to share your favorite episode out onto your social or wherever you're listening. Just hit a star rating and maybe even leave a review.
Yes.
All right. What are we talking about today, honey?
Well, we're talking about parenting.
Woohoo!
And this is a huge and often heated topic for blended couples. It's an important one, too, as we all well know. Now, 2 weeks ago, we explored 5 common pitfalls to partnership and how to avoid them. Then, in last week's Simple Step episode, we discussed how these same pitfalls can negatively impact your co-parenting relationship with an ex-spouse.
Yeah, just to kind of refresh our memory, let's do a quick recap. So we talked about previously established patterns, unrealistic expectations, emotional reactivity, communication breakdowns, and unresolved problems.
Yep.
You know what? Each of these can really derail your partnership, keeping you stuck in unhealthy habits that lead to tension and conflict and frustration, not just in your marriage, but also in your co-parenting dynamic with an ex.
Avoiding these pitfalls is critical because they can negatively impact collaboration and peace for everyone. They can also lead to ineffective parenting.
Yeah.
Today, we're adding a 6th pitfall to the list.
Okay.
And here
All right.
it is. Delusion and confusion around the differences between homes.
Oh, man, delusion, huh? Well, yeah, I was pretty delusional early on when I figured I had some expectations that were pretty out of whack. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, you know, the reality is that once a couple divorces and establishes separate households, there will be differences in how each home handles everyday parenting. And those differences can be a major source of frustration for divorced parents and incoming step parents alike. I know that very well.
Yeah.
You know, the specific rules and expectations that kids might experience in one home will naturally spill over and impact the other home as the kids move back and forth. And for blended couples, this reality often creates a certain amount of delusion and confusion.
Oh, yeah. Take screen time, for example.
Oh, screen time. Why'd you have to start there? Man.
Maybe in your home, you've established some healthy boundaries, limits, and expectations to help your kids learn moderation. But when they go to their other home, there are no limits, and they watch things that are inappropriate and stay up all night on their devices. They come back to your home completely exhausted.
Great. Now what do you do, right? Do you demand that your ex follows your screen time boundaries? Well, that's probably not very realistic. Like if we're really holding on to that, that's what we're talking about, delusional.
Yeah.
We have these unrealistic expectations. You can't control parenting decisions in the other home or enforce your expectations across households. We just have to embrace that reality.
Any more than they can do that to you, right?
That's right.
Okay, but what about the opposite approach? Should we just give up our boundaries to match the other home so we can make things easier? Ugh, that feels confusing and kind of off.
Right.
Because it's not what we really want for the kids. And now suddenly it feels like the other home is dictating our parenting decisions.
Yeah, we faced that exact dilemma when your ex, honey, gave your daughter Annika a completely unrestricted cell phone at a pretty young age.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
This was before a lot of the research came out around all the challenges that we're having now with cell phones.
Many years ago.
Yeah, and over the years, we have heard so many stories of blended family couples struggling with the pitfall of delusion and confusion over parenting differences between the homes. It's such a common struggle that we thought it would be really helpful to revisit some strategies all about this that we shared back in January of 2020. And we called them the 4 big myths about parenting when an ex has different rules. Isn't it interesting? We dropped that episode like 3 months before the pandemic hit because this became a big problem around 3 months later. In the episode, we uncovered some specific co-parenting myths that seem logical on the surface, but they often lead blended couples down a path of delusion and confusion and just a whole lot of frustration.
Oh, yeah. So today we're going to hop back into that previous episode where we share our personal struggles with these 4 myths because, let's be honest, we struggled a lot of the time with these things because my ex and I have completely different lifestyles and we're polar opposites in our parenting approach.
Yeah.
As we share each of these myths, we encourage you to reflect on whether you've been believing or buying into them and how they might be influencing your parenting decisions and your current partnership.
Yeah. And the good news, you don't have to stay stuck in delusion or confusion.
That's right.
These myths can be busted. And in the episode, we're going to walk you through the counteractive truths that can help you to stay aligned in your parenting partnership, even when your ex has completely different rules, values, and expectations. Now, right after the intro, we're going to hop into the 4 big myths about parenting when an ex has different rules.
And even if you have heard some of this before, we encourage you to stick around for some new ideas we'll be sharing towards the end that you don't want to miss.
That's right. Throughout the episode, you're going to hear us use some key phrases like, your home is your zone, and if it's in your house, forget the ex-spouse. These can help bust the myths. But beyond that, one of your biggest goals should be to foster healthy collaboration in your co-parenting relationship for the sake of your kids. If differences between the homes have become a source of stress in your co-parenting, or if you're concerned about how those differences are impacting your kids, then you're going to want to learn some effective ways to communicate with your ex, because that's what sets the stage for alignment between the home.
And there's definitely an effective way to go about that, and a not so effective way to have that conversation with an ex. So stay with us to the end, where we'll share some valuable strategies to help you navigate these challenges, minimize conflict, and build more consistency between homes.
Welcome to the Blended Family Breakthrough Podcast. We're your hosts, Mike and Kim.
We believe in a world where blended families can experience a future full of hope, connection, and peace.
That's why we offer tools, strategies, and guidance that move you from a place of confusion and conflict to experiencing a life of confidence and connection.
We're so glad you're joining us for authentic and sometimes comical conversations as we cover everything from romance to parenting, and yes, even dealing with that difficult ex.
So if you're ready to experience breakthrough in your blended family, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Today we're going to expose those myths, and then we're going to reveal the truth around each one so that you can gain some confidence here when it comes to making parenting decisions in your home, regardless of what the other home is doing. That's where we want to land.
Yeah, and when it comes to combating these myths, we've got this little mantra for you, and we want you to remember it. So if you don't get anything else out of today's episode, we want you to walk away remembering this thing and maybe even repeating it to yourself often. Our home is our zone, right? Our home is our zone. That's kind of the overarching truth that's going to help us stay centered when these myths kind of attack us. They pop up out of nowhere. And so we want to remember that our home is our zone. So let's dive into the 4 myths.
All right. Myth number 1. To make things easier for everyone, our house rules need to match the ex's. And the truth around this one is that parenting decisions do not have to cross households. It's really not absolutely necessary.
That's right.
Now, we have seen sometimes that exes can easily agree on boundaries and expectations in both homes. And if that happens naturally and everyone agrees, wholeheartedly agrees,
that's right,
then that's great.
It is. We want to celebrate that.
There's
awesome.
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But more often than not, it's very difficult to get an ex to align with how you think things should operate in their home, and to mirror, for both homes to mirror. It
can be really challenging.
It's really challenging. And it's okay, because kids can adapt to 2 sets of rules. They are quite adaptable when it comes to that. And we know this because kids have to do this every day at school, right? I mean,
that's just one simple example, right?
Yeah, there's different rules with the math teacher and the science teacher. Some you can wear a hat, some you can chew gum, and kids are used to adapting to these rules. Even younger kids in elementary school, there's different rules out on the playground as there are in the library, as there are in the cafeteria.
PE or music
each teacher has different sets of expectations, and kids learn how to adapt from one to the next.
Usually pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's really not a big deal.
That's right.
We do need to give kids a little bit of transition grace when they get, to the home, to settle in, to remember what the rules are, how they're different, and give them some grace in that. But it's very easy for kids to transition there. And another side note here is disciplinary decisions should not be made across the households unless you get agreement with an ex.
Yeah, very specific.
Yeah.
Agreement. So especially not just disciplinary decisions, but like specifically, what's the word I'm trying to think
consequences.
of? There it is. Yeah, consequences.
That's a disciplinary decision.
I lost it.
If you are grounding your child because they've misbehaved in your home or broken a rule, you can't expect your ex to honor that when the child moves to their home, and vice versa. You shouldn't be expected to carry out a consequence that your ex gave in their home unless you both come together and agree on that. Right. But there shouldn't be an expectation that just because I set this consequence that my ex should have to carry it through.
That's right.
So we want to be careful there. Now, if you're in a complex blended family, this means that both of you have brought kids into the equation here. All of this can get really, really complicated, especially if you're trying to mirror both homes.
Yeah.
Because now you're trying to get everyone on the same page, not just your ex, but your partner's ex. Yeah,
his ex, her ex, and possibly their new partners. So you have up to 6 parents all trying to get on the same page. That is highly unlikely.
Yeah.
If there's somebody out there with a story where you're doing that really well, we would love to meet you and hear your story. But that's not the story that we hear. And that can be really challenging.
Yeah.
If we get locked into this myth, we could end up creating double standards in their home, because I'm trying to match the rules for my kids with my ex, and you're trying to match the rules with your kids for your ex. And now all of a sudden our 2 sets of kids
in our own home
in our home have 2 different sets of rules. And so we're getting on a slippery slope there and playing a dangerous game. What we've got to remember is our home is our zone, and our values and our priorities is what we're going to focus on in our home, regardless of what either ex is doing.
Hey, want to join us for a fun, encouraging, faith-centered day of blended family learning?
We know firsthand the ups and downs of blending a family. When things are good, you feel secure and connected. But it doesn't take much for blended couples to hit a wall of confusion and disconnection, leading to discouragement, frustration, and even hopelessness. When things are tough, the emotional intensity can keep couples stuck. But you don't have to stay there.
That's right. Join us for the Blended and Blessed one-day event, a powerful experience designed to equip you with practical tools, encouragement, and expert guidance to help you navigate the challenges of blended family life. It's only $20 to join, and you can live stream it right from your living room on Saturday, April 5th. At this year's event, you'll discover a path to meaningful and mindful change that will restore hope and transform your marriage.
Don't miss this opportunity to strengthen your blended family. Scroll all the way to the bottom of the show notes and click the link to reserve your spot today. And we also want to bring up the point that different doesn't necessarily mean bad. Just because the 2 homes operate very differently and have different priorities and focus on different things, it doesn't mean that it's bad for your kids.
Yeah.
So let me give an example there. Let's say one home is really, really conscious about game time and want the kids to be active, pursuing an active lifestyle.
Physical activity.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's say, and we've done this before in our house too, let's say the kids over there have to earn their game time or their screen time.
Yeah.
So they need to go out and play at the playground or shoot hoops in the yard or go on a bike ride, whatever it is, and balance that with game time. And they keep very close tabs on that. And let's say in the other home, there is no keeping track of game time. It's free. Kids can be on games whenever they want, but that family is also focused on academics.
Yeah.
And as long as the kids' grades are good and they're getting their assignments done and doing well in school, they don't worry about game time.
Yeah.
But if their grades were to slide or they were to start slipping in school, then they would revisit it and start putting more restraints on it. So one home is focused on really keeping track of game time and focus more on physical. The other home, not so much focused on gaming time, but still have high priorities in other places. Very different approach, but neither is a bad thing for your kids.
Yeah.
They're getting good things from both homes.
They're getting the value of a work ethic when we're focused on academics, and they're getting the value of life balance when in the other home focused on physical activity and that kind of thing.
So we don't want to criticize and attack the other home just because they don't do something you do.
Yeah.
Because they could be doing other things that are equally as valuable for the kids that you may not be doing.
That's right.
So look at the big picture. Don't focus on menial little, every little thing. That's going to drive you nuts.
Just keep focused on your home as your zone.
Here's the bottom line. When we try to match everything between the two homes, the rules, the consequences, the boundaries, what happens is it tends to put us in a position of having to compromise some things that are really important to us in order to match what's going on with the other home. Things like values, lifestyle choices, things we want to teach our kids, character traits, all kinds of important things come into light here when we're setting up our households.
Yeah, and it puts you in that position of pressure.
Yeah.
And that actually leads us to myth number 2. And myth number 2 says, we're just going to need to lower our standards a bit to appease the kids, or else they might reject our home or refuse to spend time with us. And that's a real fear. Like when we have that, we've had that in our story. Annika's come to us and said, oh, Dad's house is just more fun. I don't want to spend as much time in your house. And
or Dad lets me do this and that.
Yeah. And that hurts. It's very hurtful. And we don't want to feel that pain. And so it challenges us to lower, or it makes us feel like we might have to lower our standards just to appease them. But here's the truth. Parenting decisions that are influenced by fear or guilt are typically not the best decisions.
Oh, yes. That's so true.
Yeah. And, it's challenging and it's tempting because parenting, following the divorce is hard enough. When you're on your own, you're feeling guilty about the losses and the challenges that your kids have endured. And it's easy to kind of get a little bit more permissive and
relaxed.
Get relaxed on that. And then the pressure builds. And sometimes it's even more challenging when you've got another partner, you've repartnered, and now they want to impose some more rules and whatnot. Now you're stuck in what we call that trapped teammate. We're going to talk about more. We've mentioned that before. And that feeling of guilt and fear then gets amplified even more when the child is starting to make comparisons to that other home. They're voicing complaints about your home. It's so hurtful. Those are real hurts.
Yeah.
But the truth is we don't want to be compromising on that out of fear or guilt.
Yeah.
What we really want to be doing is focusing on raising a child who's going to become a responsible adult.
Yeah, we have a job.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes,
job.
One of my mentors have told me more than one time is, hey, we're not raising kids here. We're raising adults, right? And there's a mindset shift that has to go in that. What we're doing is we're training them to become adults. So that means we have to stand firm on our priorities and firm on our values and firm on our boundaries so that they can learn that well. And so we get this pressure and we have the guilt and we have the fear. I know that you experienced that.
Yeah,
You also
definitely.
had the pressure sometimes from the ex saying, hey, lighten up, like mellow out.
Yeah.
And we're going, no, we don't want to compromise our values. And it's not about lightening up.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me a little bit about what was going on inside of you. What were you feeling when you felt that pressure?
Well, it's hard when you have an ex judging the decisions you're making in your home and criticizing possibly even. That can be really tough. And
well, yeah, your ex was judging your decisions, but you also had me on the other side, pushing decisions as well, right?
Yeah, because you wanted more structure too. And I felt paralyzed a lot of the time. And I definitely caved into fear and guilt. And every time I did that, it was not a good decision. I later regretted any decisions made based on fear or guilt. Mm-hmm. But the bottom line for me, I had to remember that I need to do what I feel is best for my child.
Yeah.
I am her parent. My ex can make his decisions in his home. Mm-hmm. But I need to step up and make the right decisions in my home as well. And there were certain character traits and life skills and values that I wanted to teach my daughter. Yeah. And I knew that she was not going to get that type of training in the other home. So it was up to us to do it. And so I had to move past my fears, move past my guilt, and really step up and hold firm.
Yeah, regardless of what he was doing. Mm-hmm. Would you say that fear that you felt was more kind of fearing the rejection from Annika than anything else? Yeah. And that's a real fear. Mm-hmm. But I want to tell everybody listening something. The truth is that in general, kids love their parents. They love both of their parents. And regardless of what they're bucking against or what they're saying, in most cases, kids want to stay connected to both of their parents. Right. You have to work really hard to make a kid not want to be around you, truly at the heart of it.
Yeah.
So they might be saying this today, but remember, this isn't a season. We have a tendency to kind of judge what is happening today as the final thing.
Or
like
it's that's
the end
forever.
Of the story. It's going to be like this forever. They're never going to want to be around me. The truth is you're probably just in a really difficult season right now, and you need to move through that season.
Yeah. In fact, when you set healthy boundaries with your kids, you should expect them to push up against them.
That's right.
That's something that you should just expect to happen and move past it. You're the adult, hold firm.
Yeah.
Because boundaries actually communicate love and security to kids.
In the long run, they will figure that out.
Yep.
Absolutely. We've seen that happen with our daughter.
And, I've had to explain to my daughter before that my goal is to be the best mom I can be for you. And in this particular situation, I really feel strongly that, and then I let her know what the boundary is. And if she brings up, the whole, daddy doesn't, make me do that, or daddy doesn't care about that, I don't criticize, but that's his choice to make, and he's doing what he feels is best.
That's right.
And I need to do what I feel is best in our home. It's okay if he does something different.
Yeah. I love, a couple episodes back, we had that little script that was, you know what? I love you too much to let you do whatever that is.
To not
put this boundary in place. I love you too much.
Yeah.
It's pretty tough for kids to argue with that,
Yeah, there's really good reasons that you have priorities and values and boundaries.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah. Of course there is. You want to keep your kids safe, right? You want to teach them good life lessons that are going to help them grow into responsible adults.
Yeah,
so don't let the pressure from the kids or the ex, don't let the fear or the guilt rob you of the things that you know are right for your kids. Just remember that mantra. Our home is our zone, right? We said that was overarching. Our home is our zone. So you hold on to that. All right. All right. Well, what's myth number 3?
Myth number 3 is all about stuff. And you might get stuck in the thinking, I don't have the authority to impose healthy limits around items that my ex has purchased. That's the myth right there. And
why is that a big deal? Like they bring their socks over, you got to put boundaries around their socks.
Well, honey, we know how kids are these days. It's all about the devices, right?
Isn't that true?
Yeah. So this is especially a big struggle around phones, tablets, laptops, gaming items,
devices.
Those things. Yeah. But the truth is, if it's in your house, forget the ex-spouse.
You're a poet and didn't know it. If it's in your house, don't literally forget the ex-spouse, but
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Well, just because you didn't swipe your debit card to purchase that particular device, it doesn't mean that you don't have any say over how and when it gets used in your home.
Yeah, that's good.
Now, some of what we're about to say might seem a little radical, but we want you to hang in there because we've learned this lesson the hard way, and we want you to learn from us.
Totally.
When Annika was 11, and this was how many years ago?
Oh, what?
13 years ago. This was right on the cusp of kids having cell phones everywhere they went. It was becoming the norm. It wasn't quite yet the norm, but she was 11 and her dad decided to buy her a cell phone. Unfortunately, he did not give her any limits or boundaries around this cell phone. It was just, here you go, have fun.
Yep.
Well, she would come to our house, of course, and want to bring her cell phone, which, of course, we wanted her to do that. She became attached to it very quickly. But I felt like we didn't have the authority to set any boundaries around the cell phone because technically we didn't own the cell phone.
Right.
That was kind
of
my
paying the monthly bill. We had nothing to do with the financial side of it.
Yeah. But this really did not go well.
No.
Because there were things that she was doing at her dad's house, such as sleeping with her cell phone all night and getting interrupted by texts from kids all night, that we didn't feel was healthy.
Yep.
And of course, we can't dictate what's going on in his home, but she would bring it to our home and want to do the same thing.
She wanted to be able to respond to it at the dinner table or while we were having meals or during family time.
All the time.
Yeah,
I mean, just
she was
crazy.
getting onto different platforms and getting into trouble she wasn't supposed to be on.
She was not mature enough.
Yeah.
She was not mature enough to balance cell phone use or to know how to use it responsibly.
Right.
And as a result, she got into some trouble. She was, up all night texting and then tired the next day, or friends would tempt her to sneak out in the middle of the night, which she did. And we learned really the hard way that this was not a healthy situation.
And it was painful for us when we started imposing some boundaries around there because we felt, we wanted it plugged in our room where we had some control over it.
Which is what our mutual kids do.
Right. We wanted it not even in her pocket, but somewhere else when we were having family game night or at the dinner table. And that's where, Kim just said, well, some of this might sound really radical, but we felt like we were combating, like swinging a way over to another side just to try to create some balance. And so we went pretty far the other way there for a little while too.
Yeah. So what we want to kind of unravel here is that once something enters your home, an item, you absolutely have the authority to be very clear about the boundaries. Should they have the device in their room?
Yeah, these are great questions.
With the door closed or open?
Yeah.
Should they have it when they go to bed at night? Should they have it at the dinner table? Should there be limitations on time?
Yeah, these are all questions you should be asking yourself, even if you don't own the device.
Yeah. When, for how long, and what kind of content?
Yeah.
These are all things that you can explore in your home, whether you bought the device or not.
Yeah. And those three things that you just listed, when can it be used, for how long can it be used, and what kind of content on it, those are kind of the big three deals that we find that parents lock into battles with their kids and that they lock into battles with their ex. Because sometimes the how long, when, and what kind of content, the ex doesn't see it the same way as you do.
Yeah.
And that's okay. When it comes into your home, you have the authority. Your home is your zone.
And it can be tough for kids because they are going to get angry and frustrated with you.
That's right. Yeah.
There's no doubt that this is going to be hard for them.
Yeah. So that's a big fear, right?
That
for
is
parents
a big fear.
Is, oh man, if I tell my kids they can't have their cell phone or do something with their cell phone, then they're really not going to want to come to my house, right? Would you agree that's a pretty big fear?
That's definitely a possibility.
Yeah. So what can we do when we know we have some of those fears?
Again, I would try to explain to the child what it is you're trying to teach them. It's not that you don't want them to enjoy their device. It's that you want to teach them healthy balance and really try to open their eyes to the bigger picture.
So some kids might respond to that, but other kids, we got to be more clear,
A little more direct.
and a little bit more direct. And rather than just holding a hard line of saying, look, cell phone doesn't come to our home or whatnot. One of the ways that we can deal with both our kids and the ex is learning how to give them options. Right. So, hey, we would love for you to bring the device. You're welcome to bring the device, but you need to respect our boundaries in our home. And if that's not okay, then we can just leave the phone at your dad's house. I know that sounds really scary. I know that they might buck against that, and there's some fear that they're going to reject you because you're holding that hard line. But in the long run, their desire to be connected to you will outlive, it'll outweigh a connection to a device. So be brave here. Test the waters, but be brave.
And take it from us. You'll be glad you did. I mean, I wish that we had early on given this option. It's fine to bring it, but here are the boundaries. Here are why these boundaries are important. You need to get your rest. Make it very clear. Or you can leave the phone at your dad's house. That's fine too.
Yep. Back kind of in the intro there, I talked about that, remembering that feeling of sitting there watching a horror movie with Annika. And it was just a sick feeling in my gut. And not that, we're anti-horror movies. I'm just sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, like I can't believe I'm watching this with this young, impressionable child. And this is way too mature for her. And it was around these first few myths where I just felt like I had to compromise the values. When we talk about, when, for how long, and what kind of content. This was content related stuff that was fine at her dad's, but it really wasn't fine for us, especially in that stage of her life. Your home is your zone.
Yeah. And at that point, you have a decision. Are you going to reinforce this that's being taught in the other home? Or are you going to help the child stand up to and against something that they're not ready and protect them? Are you going to reinforce or protect?
That's a great way to put it, because one of my biggest parenting regrets in those years when Annika was moving back and forth is those times where I compromised my values and I ended up reinforcing the exact lesson I didn't want to teach her.
Yeah.
So I got to think about those. And that's true for all three of these first
and that's not what's best for your child. No. That's the bottom line. What is the best
Our home is our zone. That's right. We're going to hold on to our values. Now, let's keep moving. We're starting to
number
get,
four,
we're babbling here now. Let's move to
we
myth
could get up on a
number
soapbox
4.
over this stuff.
We weren't already on it? Myth number 4. It says, I can't really influence my kids because my time with them is so limited.
Oh.
That is hard. When we only have them every other weekend or sometimes even less, we can be really tempted to believe that our influence has been dramatically
diminished.
Reduced. Yeah. And the truth, here's the truth about influence though. Influence is really based on quality, not necessarily quantity. So let me give you a little bit of a different example. So I moved back and forth between 2 homes when I was a kid, but it was a little bit different for me. If you know anything about my story, my mom passed away when I was about a year old. And I lived with my grandparents on my bio mom's side for a while. Well, when my dad remarried, we moved out of there, and I continued to go back and see Nana and Papa, usually about 1 weekend every month. So I was only there about 2.5 days a month. Now, the environment in between the 2 homes was dramatically different. We were fairly dysfunctional in my dad and stepmom's house, and it was volatile, and there was some abuse going on, and it was just not a fun environment. And there were, they wanted to teach us how to be responsible adults, but it wasn't. I wouldn't say it was nurturing in that environment. Now, Nana and Papa were very much different. It was a peaceful place. They didn't put up with garbage from me. Like if I got out of line, they weren't afraid to tell me.
So
they were kind of old school.
Boundaries.
They absolutely set boundaries. They had values, and they weren't going to compromise those values. And yet, we also just hung together. Yeah. I hung out a lot of time in Papa's wood shop. Nana and I did a lot of reading stories and just enjoying our time together. And as I grew up and I hit my late teens and my early 20s, I remember hitting, life's dilemmas that we all hit. And I did a lot of comparing between the values that I saw in those two homes, the values that I saw being lived out in my dad and stepmom's house versus what was going on at Nana and Papa's. And I was very blessed to have that example, that have Nana and Papa's example. And I could go back and go, now, wait, what would they maybe tell me to do in this case? And that was only 2.5 days a month.
Yeah, very limited.
Yeah, they absolutely influenced me with real quality time. And so if you are a parent and you're really limited on your time, it can be tempting sometimes to either pull back on boundaries or kind of almost shrug our shoulders and give up.
Yeah, what's the point?
Feeling hopeless. I want you to have hope. I want you to hear that story of mine and recognize, even in just a couple days a month, how absolutely influential Nana and Papa were. You can be that same influence
and
to your kids.
And still hold healthy boundaries.
And still hold healthy boundaries. You know, kids need healthy boundaries in order to feel loved. When we say, hey, I love you too much, and I put these boundaries around you to protect you and love you. And teach you, it helps them know that you're loving them. So I know you don't want to spend all your limited time enforcing rules and disciplining and all of that. No. You do need to move through that feeling, though, when it comes to that time where you're questioning, am I going to hold on to this boundary or am I going to compromise my values just because I'm fearful that I'm going to not be influential in my child's life? You're going to be influential. If you have that limited time, don't let the pressure of your ex or the complaints of your kids cause you to compromise what you know is right. Even in that limited time, remember your home is your zone and you're loving your kids as you go through that time. Yeah. So don't let that rob you.
Yeah.
So let's do a little recap. Myth number 1 was to make things easier for everyone, our house rules need to match the ex's. But the truth is that parenting decisions do not have to cross households. Kids can adjust back and forth. Okay, that was myth number 1. Myth number 2 was we're going to need to lower our standards in order to appease the kids, or else they might try to reject our home or refuse to spend time with us. But you know, the truth is, parenting decisions that are influenced by fear or guilt are typically not the best decisions. So let's try not to have that be a driving factor in our parenting
that leads
decisions.
to regret.
That's right. Myth number 3. This one was all about the stuff, right? It's get stuck in that thinking of, well, I don't have the authority to impose healthy limits around items that my ex purchased, like a cell phone or a tablet or a gaming device. But the truth is, if it's in your house, forget the ex-spouse. That was Kim's little rhyme there. And just make sure that you're setting the healthy boundaries around those things when they're in your home, right? And then finally, myth number 4, when we just feel hopeless, like I can't really influence my kids because my time with them is so limited. But we've got to remember the truth that influence is based on quality, not on quantity. And you can have a tremendous influence even in your limited time.
Yep.
So that's our 4 myths and the 4 truths.
What's the bottom line?
So the bottom line is your home is your zone. Remember that. Hopefully today's discussion gave fresh insight and clarity to help you move forward with parenting decisions and healthy partnership.
Absolutely. You don't have to stay stuck in delusion, confusion, frustration, or regret just because there are differences in rules, values, and expectations between homes. Now let's dive deeper into myth number 1 and explore how we can increase alignment between homes.
Yeah, let's do that. Now remember, myth number 1 says to make things easier for everyone, our house rules need to match the ex's. You know, there's actually some truth to this. It is easier for kids when both homes have similar expectations. Consistency helps create stability. While kids can adapt to different rules, they can really thrive when there's a sense of predictability between the 2 different households.
Yeah, it does make things easier.
Sure.
The counteractive truth to that first myth is twofold. First, parenting decisions do not have to cross households. And consistency between homes is beneficial, but not always within your control.
Mm-hmm.
While it may not be doable in your unique situation, it's worth the effort to collaborate with your ex whenever possible to create more consistency for your kids.
And while all this can be challenging, it's not impossible. The key is how you communicate with your ex about these differences. So let's talk about how to foster collaboration instead of conflict, especially when discussing the differences between each of your homes.
Now, before we get into what works, let's highlight what doesn't.
Oh,
Because some approaches only lead to communication breakdowns, and we don't want that. The first thing that does not work is blaming. If you start the conversation with criticism and blame, it won't go well. If you say something like, I can't believe you let the kids sleep with their phones. Do you even care about their well-being? Well, that approach instantly triggers defensiveness and shuts down any real discussion.
That's right. You know, another unhelpful approach, demanding.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, when the kids are at your house, they need to put their devices away by 9 o'clock, and you need to limit their screen time to just 2 hours a day. That's where I would get a little delusional. I like to demand sometimes. Trying to control, dictate, or coerce your ex is likely to backfire. They may resist just to push back, or they might agree in the moment, kind of placate you, but have absolutely no intention of following through on
Right.
that. Yeah.
Then you'll be frustrated later on
For
anyway.
sure, yeah.
Then there's boasting, acting as though you're the better parent. At my house, I actually care about their health, so I enforce screen time limits to make sure they get enough sleep. Ooh, this can come off as condescending or judgmental, which could make your ex react with judgment towards something you're doing that they don't agree with. And now you're playing the tit for tat game, which won't lead to any kind of productive conversation, believe me.
That's right. Approaching a conversation with blaming, demanding, or boasting is only going to lead to resentment and power struggles and gridlock. And let's be honest, that's not going to get you anywhere.
No.
Before you're too quick to be like, well, I don't ever do any of those things. Think about when you're like triggered and you're really struggling emotionally.
Yeah.
I bet once in a while we let something like that fly.
Yeah, none of us are perfect, that's
right.
for sure.
Yeah.
But let's talk about what does work, because we want to learn to do this better. If you want to build more consistency between homes, focus on clear, respectful communication with a professional approach. Some of the biggest barriers to successful co-parenting are poor communication, misunderstandings, and assumptions.
That's right.
To prevent these from happening, use a calm, direct, and solution-focused approach. One of the best tools for this is the 4 A's.
That's right. The 4 A's help set up the right tone and structure for conversation. So with just a little bit of thought and intentionality around a framework like this, you can really approach those difficult conversations with your ex in a pretty predictable way. Yeah.
Yeah, this can be a game changer.
Yeah. So let's talk about the 4 A's. The first A is to affirm. Okay. You want to affirm your ex in some way. Now, affirmation and agreement are two different things. Okay. Even a small acknowledgement can create a positive atmosphere.
Right.
Here's an example. You know, the kids seem to be really enjoying those new tablets you got them. It's just an observation, right? Affirmation is often just an observation.
Yep, you're affirming. The second A is acknowledge the common ground. Find something you both agree on and state it clearly. Here's an example. I know we both want what's best for the kids.
Yeah.
It's really simple.
Yeah, that's great. The third A is to assure cooperation. You want to reassure them that you're not trying to control them. You actually want to work together. Here's what that sounds like. I'd love for us to find a way to create more consistency so the kids know what to expect in both homes.
And then the final A is ask. Ask for their partnership. Frame your concern as a collaborative effort, not a demand.
Yeah.
Here's what that sounds like. Hey, I've noticed the kids have different screen time rules in each home. Would you be open to working towards some common guidelines so it's easier for them?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Now, the key is to state your concern and then listen. Don't interrupt. Don't react emotionally. Just listen. Let's say your ex responds with something like, well, I don't have time to monitor everything they do. They use their devices to socialize with their friends. Here's how you can apply the 4 A's as you respond to that. Yeah, I get it. Kids today really rely on their devices to stay connected.
There's the affirmation, affirm.
I know we both want them to do well in school and have the energy for their activities.
There's acknowledge.
I've noticed that when they don't get enough sleep, they really struggle the next day. I'd love for us to work together to help them get better rest.
That's assuring cooperation.
Would you be open to setting up a bedtime for their devices and keeping them outside their bedrooms overnight so they can get better sleep?
And now she just asked for partnership, right? And then when you deliver all that, here's one of the hardest parts. Just listen, right? If they say something like, well, I guess I'll have to think about that. Consider that a win, right? That's actually some forward movement. And then give them a little bit of space and maybe try to follow up a bit later.
And you can rinse and repeat these 4 A's over and over and over, regardless of how your ex responds to you.
That's right. And here's a pro tip. Focus on only one thing at a time. If you overwhelm your ex with too many concerns at once, they are pretty likely to either shut down or deflect or even react defensively. So just focus on one thing at a time.
One thing at a time. The reality is there are no guarantees. You can't control your ex or force them to change, but you can focus on influencing them over time by consistently showing up with respect and a willingness to collaborate with them. Even if your ex dismisses your request, you've done your part, and that's something you can feel good about. At the very least, you've planted a seed of awareness. Over time, they may begin to notice how disengaged and sluggish the kids become after staying up late on their screens. And when that happens, they might just feel a greater sense of parental responsibility and choose to implement the change on their own, ultimately providing more consistency for your kids.
That's right. And you know what? We focused on screen time today, but we can apply these in just about any place where we're struggling to have collaboration working across the households.
And there's differences.
Absolutely. Now, the 4 A's, it's not magic.
Nope.
But they create the best conditions for positive change. Affirm, acknowledge, assure, and ask. If you've got years of co-parenting ahead, wouldn't it be worth building more consistency and reducing stress for everyone?
Absolutely.
For sure. Hey, thanks so much for joining us today. We hope that those 4 myths and counteractive truths were really valuable to you, but also this collaboration piece of the 4 A's can really help you build more consistency across those households. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to make this episode a wrap.
Until next time.